The Sony ZV-E10 Mark II has finally hit these real and digital streets. And if you're trying to decide whether or not you should choose this, the a6700, or maybe jump up to the Sony ZV-E1, or maybe you might want to look someplace else. We're just going to talk about some of those decisions that are going into what would make this decision worth it if you're coming from the Mark I, if you're just buying a camera for the first time, or if you think you need a little bit more. So some brand new updates coming to the Mark II are the 4K 60 422 10-bit video recording. You're getting S-Log3 as Cinetone, and you're getting the Cine Vlog settings in the new camera. And even if you don't use it that often, it's nice to have it and not need it versus want it and then your camera just doesn't have it. One of my favorite things about this update is the fact that you are getting that deeper grip like we saw on the Sony ZV-E1, not quite like the a6700, which is kind of what I predicted because it's that ZV camera body style. And the biggest update, we are no longer beholden to the FW50 batteries. We're getting the FZ100 battery, so you should be getting better battery life performance, especially at your base level 4K and 1080p video. And some of my other favorite updates with this is the 4K 30 USB-C live streaming. I saw on the announcement video that they're not really showing a computer mixed in there. So I wonder, is there some way now to stream just with your camera and your smartphone or something like that? Or like, what is that looking like? So the 4K 30 USB-C, that's great. And you're still getting amazing HDMI live streaming and the ability to use your LUTs in USB-C as well as your HDMI live streaming. So if you have a proprietary look or a way that your clients like their stuff to look, you can now get all of that baked in goodness in your live shows. Quiet as kept, you already could do that with the Mark I, but that's beside the point. And then some of the concerns that we've all had really coming from the recent cameras that are doing 4K 10-bit is overheating. And I'm seeing much better performance when it comes to this Mark II body, similar to what we have with the Mark I, which some people experience overheating even at that high heat setting. I have not really run into that except for once, but it wasn't my camera and the high heat setting was on. But on my cameras, it's not something that I usually tend to run into. But I love that this is 4K 10-bit, 4K 60, whatever, and the battery is dying before you're even seeing the overheating settings. So I wonder if the a6700 ZV-E1 cameras are going to see some level of a firmware update just to improve and enhance the performance for overheating. Not to mention the new menu, as well as the touchscreen, and of course that 26 megapixel sensor coming from the FX30, put in the a6700, and now it's coming to the Mark II. And then my absolute favorite thing that even I was gushing over that Nikon just recently introduced is when you turn your camera in a vertical mode, is that the camera settings usually stay on all of the Sony cameras. It stays in a horizontal framing, so you see it and you understand what you're looking at, but it would be more helpful to really be able to flip the screen around, see the settings, and they're in a readable format. Well, the new Mark II has that. All right, but the grass ain't greener on all sides of the street, so let's get into the things that are just, would have made this a chef's kiss, and just, it's a miss. I'm just gonna call a spade, it's a miss. Of course, right off the rip, that is going to be dynamic active stabilization coupled with the IBIS in the camera. We're still going to get active stabilization, which is nice, and it's improved, so that is a big bonus. So it's more usable than it has been in the Mark I, because in the Mark I, it's just like, if you need handheld B-roll shots, that's great. That's what it's for. Not necessarily if you're walking, because I tried it. I did it on accident. It looks like hot garbage. But on this new camera, it looks better, not necessarily like amazing and mind-blowing, but it looks better and more doable and less likely to probably mess up your footage, unlike the Mark I. But I'm not going to pretend that not having dynamic active stabilization, especially as a ZV-E1 owner and Mark I owner as well, it's disappointing. I've owned all of the ZV cameras minus the ZV-1F, and I was curious, is Sony going to ZV-1F up this camera? So I would still say no, but there are still some like disappointments there. And like I said, the IBIS, lack of IBIS, in-body image stabilization in the camera is definitely one. Dynamic active should have been in there as well. I think that should have been, if it's not going to be in the a6700, which it's not, dynamic active should have made its way to this camera, because then we would know if the ZV-1 Mark III, and if they're going to do any other kind of ZV cameras, those should have dynamic active as well, especially if the more hybrid cameras won't. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what the A7S Mark IV has to hold for us, or the A7 V. I think those will have dynamic active. So it must be a price point thing. So all those features are great, but there are some things that I wish I had seen that I'm not seeing in the coverage yet. And again, these are brand new videos, embargo drops and the whatnot, so they don't have time to literally do a deep dive in every single thing. So kudos to them for the content that they were able to get out. But I have my eyes set on other things coming from the Mark I, having the ZV-E1, and then wishing that for the ZV-E10 Mark II, like there's some better performance. One of those things would be the ability to lock your automatic white balance in addition to your automatic exposure lock. Now this comes in handy, especially somebody that loves the ZV line of cameras and that travels a lot. When I'm traveling, I do not want to constantly find the best white balance using a gray card or the best exposure, looking at settings and all that stuff, because you're taken out of the experience, focus more on the tech. The best thing with a camera when you have one is the fact that it gets out of the way and it makes creating easier, which makes it fun. Not having that in the Mark I, it was more of an annoyance. Like you can lock the exposure, but you couldn't lock the white balance. So I'm hoping and I'm thinking that is something that we should see. But something else I didn't hear about was the fact that the anti-flicker mode that was announced in the ZV-E1, I'm not hearing that mentioned as well. So I'm kind of posed to think that maybe it's not in the camera. And the fact that there is no actual shutter, so when you're taking photos and you see that, that's not in the camera anymore. So the fact you're going to get banding is an expectation. But if you have the anti-flicker mode, you can use that in photos or video. So the fact that that's not there, it will make things indoors a little bit more frustrating. And there is real use case scenarios for that. Like when I went to Ecamm Creator Camp and we're indoors and there is these fairy lights and Christmas lights and stuff, that stuff is flickering. Okay, I'm already capturing my experience. I can automatically just turn on the anti-flicker mode, done, issue over. And that's the same thing. I would wish that same kind of ease of use experience for the Mark II creators that may not be able to experience that because I don't think it's in this camera. So when you compare all of these things that it has, that it doesn't have, and it being so close in price point to the A6700, as well as like the ZV-E1, if you want to go up there, and potentially other brands of cameras that are similar in this close to $1,100 to $1,200 and even up to $1,500, because think about it, if you're just getting the camera body, the kit lens has an update that's great, it's nice or whatever, but it's not something that the average everyday Joe creator that's vlogging is going to want. The fact now we don't have IBIS, great, we got an updated active stabilization, that's wonderful. But we don't have OSS lenses in abundance. They're not making them. Nobody's making them. So we're now back to using the older 10 to 18 OSS instead of the better optics and the 10 to 20G lens that just recently came out. And it's little micro decisions like that that make it more frustrating and that will make you want to go to an A6700 or go all the way up to the next ZV line of camera that does have all of this stuff, which would be the ZV-E1. But by the time you're hitting those price points and you're adding it on a lens, you're like, dang, I'm already $1,500, $1,400, $1,700, or you're getting close to that $2,000 threshold. You're like, what else could I get and how much further could I stretch my money? And it's at that point that we have to decide, like, are these things important to us or are they not? The reason why, like I said this a long time ago, why I went ahead and made that jump to the Sony ZV-E1 is because I didn't have high hopes that all of the things that are in this camera would make it down to this. And unfortunately, it's proved positive. Now, let's not get it twisted. This camera update is good. And like I thought it would be, it is going to be great. Is it something to where I feel like this is incredible? This is amazing? No. Do I feel like it's good and it's still going to be great? Yes. And I do think if you're looking between the Mark I and the Mark II, get the Mark II for the better enhancements and improvements. But if you're just a tripod only indoor creator, don't care about 10-bit, 8-bit, none of that stuff matters, you're still going to get excellent live streaming, 6K downsample from 4K, even in this camera on this older sensor. But it doesn't matter because if it's tripod locked all the time, none of those frustrations are really a frustration. It's just a limitation that the camera has. Whereas if you're an on-the-go vlogging content creator, like many of us are, or a portion of your content throughout the year includes that stuff, and you want it to match like your brand aesthetic and just not be a frustrating content creation experience, this is when that stuff would matter. And so then I would say if it's like 10% or less of your overall content for the year, the ZV-E10 Mark II would still be a great buy. Otherwise, the A6700 is the better choice, even though it doesn't have stuff like product showcase mode that's more specific to the ZV line of cameras. And if you want the Bee's Knees Hall of Fame when it comes to the ZV line of cameras, that's going to be the ZV-E1. And if you just solely want something that is truly better with IBIS and all the rest, then that would be something more in that Lumix territory that is the best in the market when it comes to IBIS. If you're 100% 10 toes down, you know, on the go vlogging, I think that could be a better option. Unfortunately, it's just a hard thing to say. It's a hard pill to swallow, but the truth is the truth nonetheless. Now, at the end of the day, would it be worth it getting this camera over anything else? I think if you're already in the Sony ecosystem, you're coming from the Mark I, you want to upgrade, or you're just getting ready to buy a camera for the first time, go with the Mark II. It's always better to get the latest and greatest, because if any updates are going to come, unexpectedly or otherwise, it's not going to be the Mark I, it's going to be Mark II. Tripod only creator, 99, 95, 90% of the time, go with the Mark I. Still going to get the best bang for your buck, and you'll be able to find these bodies uber cheap. Now, when it comes between the A6700 and the ZV-E10 Mark II, that's a different topic for a different video, but let me know your thoughts. Remember to create, post, repeat, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.